Awesome to welcome College of Idaho head coach Colby Blaine to the basketball podcast. Blaine recently helped lead College of Idaho to the 2022-23 NAIA Men's Basketball National Championship for the second national title in program history. Blaine earlier that year was named the Cascade Collegiate Conference Coach of the Year for the third time, the most in program history. He helped lead the Yotes on a school record 36-game winning streak and set other program records for wins, 36, points scored, field goals made, field goals attempted, scoring margin, and tied the school record for scoring defense. Blaine is also the fastest coach in program history to reach the 100 win mark. Colby, welcome to the basketball podcast.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Well, what a year, and what a job you've done with the program there at the College of Idaho, and 2022-23 NAIA Men's National Champions, and talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, it was a process to get there, but what a run, and you guys played so well, obviously, in the championship game as well.
Yeah, we've been building over the years. 2017-18, we made the Final Four. 2018-19, we made the Final Four. We were the number one team in the country when COVID hit, and they canceled the tournament. And so we thought we had a good chance that year. And we lost in the Elite Eight the year before this one. And then, this season we were able to accomplish it. And so it's been something in our program we've been talking a lot about. And our guys, one thing we talk about in terms of how do we achieve our goals is who do we have to become. And so it's really been cool over the last couple of years to see this squad this year develop into who they needed to be to achieve it. But, I think at the beginning of the year, we didn't know. We knew we would be good. We didn't know, how good. And it was kind of fun as the season continued to roll on. We realized, all right, we might have a shot at this. And then I do really believe by the end of the year, we truly believed in our hearts that we could win it all.
No, that's awesome. Congratulations to you and the program. And, you mentioned one of the things that is really important to you is the emotions of the game and talking to players about how they prepare for the game and the emotions of the game. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because that had to be a big part of this championship run.
Yeah, I think, one thing I've become really fascinated with is how do we, every coach wants to scout for their games. They want to have a pregame plan. And over the last couple of years, as you watch game film and you start to try to figure out what's important, you can spend all day trying to figure out what another team's sets are and what their actions are. And one thing that we've come to realize is that if we can actually prep our players for how they're going to feel each game, and then maybe more specifically how they're going to feel in each type of situation, maybe it be ball screen defense, post defense, whatever it might be. We actually feel like we're a better team when we prep for the emotion than when we prep for their actions. And so, for example, this year, the team that I got to coach, we were traditionally up at halftime in about 95% of our games this year. Out of the 38 games we played, I think we were up 35 times, whether it be 2 points or 15 points. And so one thing we would talk about at halftime all the time is momentum. All right, second half, the other team has to come back. They've got to do something to come back. And so we would always, take a big deep breath, if they started to come back, because we understood that that's supposed to happen. And you saw it in our final two games. We were up, roughly 20 points in the second half, both on Ottawa and on Indiana Tech. And they both came back because they're good teams. They needed to play a little faster. They had to take some risks, and they ended up, executing those risks. But one thing that was really cool in those moments was because we've actually prepped for the emotion of that, even though the score was getting tighter, we never as a team felt like we were broken. If you were in our huddles and our timeouts, nobody was pointing the finger. Nobody was yelling at each other. We were just talking about, okay, what's the solution? We know this can happen. And I really believe that might be why we were able to finish those really close games.
So it sounds like you're normalizing things for them to say that these are all possibilities and these are a normal part of the game. So we can handle this emotion. And then the other part is obviously it seems very matter of fact about it in terms of you're removing emotion by talking about emotion.
Sure.
Talk to us about the process of actually installing this with your players.
Well, I think, one thing that we study at the beginning of every season, we'll probably end up talking about this a lot more, but we want our players to be conceptual. We don't want them to be robotic. Robotic teams can win games early in the year. But by the end of the year, you've got to be able to read and react and make your own decisions. And so we really spend a lot of time off the court helping our guys grow as individuals. And one topic that's really come up in our conversations over the last couple of years is, where does stress come from? Stress comes from the unknown. That's what we've found in our research and our readings and things that we've done as a team. It's the uncertainty in front of you. It's the unknown in front of you. And so we really feel as a coaching staff, it's our job to help take the stress out of the game. There's already going to be plenty there by making and missing shots, or whatever, just the intensity of the crowd and the game. And so that's why we've actually moved more towards, we believe that if we can educate them on the emotions of the game, that might actually take some of the stress off of them, because they can look at each other during the middle of the game and say, yeah, we knew this was going to happen. It's okay. Whereas I've had my first year, we had a game where we got pressed, and we weren't aware of how it was going to make us feel. And I was at conflict with my two best guards. We were getting after each other because I didn't understand how they were feeling, and they didn't understand how we were feeling as a team. And so that's where it really came about 5 years ago. We learned that we just all need to be prepared for how to deal with that. But it kind of comes back to that we've got to be conceptual in our ability to play the game.
Well, I love that. I love that explanation as well. And you mentioned the scout part of this is like scout to prepare for the emotion of the game. You mentioned press. What are some other things that you feel that you have to prepare for? Is it a team that plays a slower pace, a faster pace? What are some other things?
Yeah, I mean, there's the simple concepts as always, informing them of what the ball screen defense is going to be and what the post defense is going to be, because we're always playing in those actions. And so that's very simple. But then it gets down to, in the last game, we kind of chuckle as a staff when we think about this one. Indiana Tech had a really good guard. His first name was Grant, long, scoring guard. And one thing we noticed as a staff was that he shot fakes every time he catches the ball. And if you watch the Final Four game, he probably executed about 5 or 6 shot fakes, which turned into emotional plays where Indiana Tech got a big bucket, and they were feeling the momentum, and Georgetown was a little down and out about it. And so it's even little things about that. We didn't worry about all their actions. Every time that he catch the ball in the championship game, we were yelling, shot fake, stay down, stay down. We have a team in our league who likes to cross on their free throw blockouts. They're very aggressive to go get the offensive rebounds, and they have a formula for how they do it. But you wouldn't really notice if you weren't really watching, but they go extremely fast. And so we actually scouted that and showed our guys, because if they get an offensive rebound, that's a pretty emotional play. And so we scouted that with our guys. So even more than just the ball screen defense or the post defense, we are scouting, do they play fast? Do they play slow? You just mentioned that. We have some teams in the league that will walk the ball up the court. And if you do that, there is a chance that the score could be 10-10, 10 minutes into the game. And now you're feeling pressure because you're close to halftime. And so it's a lot of things. We always got to pick 2 or 3 emotions that we want to focus on for each game. But it can go a lot deeper than just the surface stuff.
Well, I love that. That's what strikes me, is that you're going beyond the scout of just saying, we got to box out because they offensive rebound on free throws, which essentially gives players no information that they don't already know. So you're going beyond that, aren't you?
Yes. Well, and you just mentioned blockout. We played the national champions 2 years ago, Loyola of New Orleans, in the Elite Eight. And they're one of the best offensive rebound teams. And so it's very easy to just tell your team you got to block out. But we actually realized, why are they getting the rebound? And the reason they get the rebound is because you think you have them blocked out, and then they swim around you at the end and they go and grab that ball. And so we showed our guys, like, us telling you to block out is not good enough. You got to drive them. If you have one of the offensive rebounders, you have to drive him out of the paint. And so it was even another level of blockout, was you got to drive him out of there. But if it would have been really emotional had we not told them to block out, or had we not told them exactly what they needed to do instead of just block out.
And then if they do give up a blockout, or they miss a blockout and the team gets an offensive rebound, essentially what you're saying is you prepare them for the emotion of that moment as well.
Yes. Now, so for me, I'll be honest, a lot of, maybe you've watched me coach or whatever, I'm a pretty aggressive coach. I'm pretty intense. I'm loud. I'm going to coach all game long. And so one thing that it's really helped me with is I now have something where I can rationalize, where we're not in conflict, because we both know. So for example, in our national championship game, I was talking about the player who shot fakes. We jumped one time and it turned into an and one offensive rebound putback. And when that moment happened, I was able to look at my defender and say, hey, this is what we were talking about. And then we didn't jump again the rest of the game. So I felt confident because I knew that he understood and I didn't need to, get upset. And so it's really given, and he understood too because he's seen it on film. So it really has given us, it's taken conflict out of a lot of out of our team, to be honest.
Which is great. And you mentioned being aggressive or very interactive as a coach. Are you preparing your players for that as well? The emotion of being able to handle you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's come to practice in October and November, and we get ready for it. So I try, I make a commitment to our team that I'm going to be consistent every day. And truth be told, when I realized that we were as good as I thought we were, I put my foot on the pedal even harder. Like my message was, we're not going to take any chances. We are going to finish what we started. And I really truly believe that players, young men and young women, they want accountability. They want to be pushed. I don't believe that, aggressive energy is negative. It's the words in, that's the words you use that make it negative, in my opinion. And so just because we have an aggressive coaching style, doesn't mean it's not negative, or doesn't mean that it's not a positive style. Our players are prepared for how to deal with those emotions.
I agree with that. So I want you to expand on that if you could just a little bit more, because being intense is, again, I don't think anyone's saying don't be intense and don't want a coach to not win. Be competitive, but how do we do that in a productive way versus an unproductive way is really what you're saying. So talk to us about how you do it in a productive way.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I truly believe, I just gave a clinic the other day here for Idaho high school coaches, and I actually have a hard time sometimes putting things in order. And what I mean by that is, like, as you're building your program, what comes first? As you build your team, what comes first? I like to be so conceptual that sometimes I get in my own way because I won't just define it. Our motion offense, I won't define what our cuts is. Our cuts are. I just want us to play. And I think sometimes that gets a little frustrating. And so I'm trying my best to start defining, okay, what actually matters, and maybe more so what matters first. And I truly believe, after reflecting on our team this year and maybe some teams in the past, that the first thing you got to build with your team, and I don't believe there is an exception, is the team's mentality. And I believe in an aggressive, cohesive, team that is going to battle and is going to, be gritty and tough. And so I believe that's day one of practice, and you got to be a tough team. Like we like David Goggins here, who's an author, can't hurt me and never finished. He's a former Navy SEAL, and his whole books are just about being tough and getting through hard times. And that's our mentality that we want in our program. And so, we start to establish that from day one. But some other things, in terms of how to not make it negative, is that, like, for example, I don't believe in subbing people out on mistakes. We have a pretty detailed way in terms of how we sub, but I think that eliminates a lot of conflict. If I'm going to play you, I'm playing you for the minutes that I believe you should play, because I think that you can do something in those minutes, even if you've made a mistake. And so, even if I'm getting, a lot of times you'll see me, I'll get fired up with our team or a player because I want their mentality to maybe take another step above where it's at, but I'm not going to take you out of the game, because I believe that you are capable of finishing your segment and doing something positive. And then of course, I think it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff too. If you're going to be tough on your players, you got to love your players just as much. And we spend a lot of time together. We try to get in the gym with our guys, and we eat a lot of meals together. And so little things like that is what helps those aggressive moments.
I love talking about this. And you mentioned substitutions and you use a subchart. So I want you to talk about that. But one of the things that connects for me is that using that subchart does remove emotion from a lot of your decisions as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. I picked up the subchart idea from my former boss, Scott Garson, who had a great career here at College of Idaho, and is now at Santa Clara as an assistant. But I've kept the subchart for multiple reasons. And it's funny because when you do talk to other teams or coaches, And every year when you have new players in your program, you see the conflict that the chart brings. There are a lot of, parents, players, other coaches who say, well, what if that player is playing really well? Why are you subbing him out? And there is some merit to that, and I'll come back to that in a second, or I just can't stick to it. Every game changes, and there's foul trouble, and that stuff does happen. But we've actually found that the benefits of the subchart, which I'll explain here, outweigh what you think are the negatives. And so what happens is we played 9 guys this year, and our leading minute getter only played 25 minutes. I truly believe a lot of guys played 20, and our leading minute getter is 25. I truly believe that if you're going to play as hard as you cannot play 40 minutes. You cannot play 35 minutes, and you can barely play 30 all year long, in my professional opinion, if you're going to play as hard as you can. I also believe that for us to be a championship team, we have to get the most production we can from the deepest bench that we can provide. Can you win a game with 6 players? Yes. Can you win 38 games with 6 players? I don't think you can. I think you wear out emotionally. Kids get into little different ruts. You get into foul trouble. You hit different parts of the year. And so for us to be a championship team, we want to play 8, 9, 10 guys. And we want all of those guys to be confident. Well, what happens with the subchart, we use it for the first half, and then the second half is a little bit more free flowing. But this year I was able to pretty much use it almost each half, every game. But what happens is in November and December, there is some conflict, because just like any normal subbing, sometimes they don't know when they're going in. Their subchart maybe got changed a little bit, and they're a little uneasy about it. But my goal is every year with about 15 games to go, we have the exact same rotation. And what you see when we get to that point. Now, I'm having conversations with our players in November and December, like, hey, here's where you're at, here's what we're thinking. And there is conflict at times. But when we hit January and February, it takes the stress off of our guys. They know when they're going in. They know they're going to get a significant amount of minutes. The least we played anybody in our rotation was 14 minutes this year, 14 and a half, I think. And so there were nights where he played 20. But we're not playing anybody for just 3 or 5 minutes. That type of playing time is emotional, and it's hard. And how do you expect a player to hit a shot, if they're only playing 3 to 5 minutes? And so long story short, one thing I see, I know I'm moving in different directions here, but as we get down the stretch, we do have the most confident team in the country, because they know when they're going in, and they also know when they're coming out. And if you watch our team, we actually have a rule that when you get subbed out, you go all the way down the bench, you give out your high fives, and then you come back to the beginning of the bench. We actually started that about 4 years ago. And so we have this real cohesiveness, and our team truly believes that everybody can help produce. And so now, like, you look at our offensive stats this year, we scored the ball at about just shy of 50% from the field goal. And some of that, I think, is guys are confident to just make shots. They're confident to make plays. One thing I see a lot, this is where the subchart helps. Late in the year, you see it on every team. A coach will play a kid who usually plays 5 or 10 minutes, and he'll play him 20 one night. And the kid will have decent stats. But then the next game, he only plays him 3. You see it all the time on social media. You hear it when you're recruiting transfers. Coach was playing me for about 4 games, and then he stopped playing me. Well, the truth is he probably didn't do anything. He just might be 8, 9, 10 on the rotation, and the coach just isn't going to play him 20 every night. But if you're doing that with the final 10 games of the season, you got guys checking in and out. You got guys in the locker room who are saying, well, I don't know. I played 20 minutes last night. I don't know why I'm playing only 3 tonight. And so that's where our subchart's huge. It really helps eliminate the confusion, and it also forces us to play some of our role guys, even when things are tight.
It's love talking about this, and certainly the NBA traditionally uses more of this subchart type of focus. I want to dive deeper. Let us know, maybe at the beginning of the season, how are you first establishing your initial subchart? What factors go into it? And then you mentioned tweaking it. Of course, you're tweaking it to get it to the right point. But let's start from the beginning about establishing your subchart.
Yeah, well, it's funny. When we got back from the national tournament, I was sitting on my couch watching some of the NBA playoffs, and I pull out a subchart and I start filling it out just to see what could it look like with the guys we have coming back next year, and we're losing. We graduate our starting 2 guard, and so things shift, and so subcharts can already start. And we do, I know we'll probably talk about this, but we do play a zone defense. And so there is some strategy about having the right positions in at the right time. If we do get off base in terms of positions, then sometimes we'll go man. But in terms of establishing it, that I guess that would be a big key, is that we do have some strategy in terms of our defense that we want on the court. We're in a 2-3 zone, and so we always need two guys up top who are lateral. It doesn't matter really what position they are offensively. It matters how do they move defensively. Like, for example, this next year, I'm going to play one of my fours on offense. I'm going to play him at the top of the zone, which traditionally you would think that maybe a 1 or a 2 would play on top of the zone. But he's a great lateral athlete. So we need to have two lateral athletes in at the same time. We need to have two wings in that can rebound. And then I'm always going to have a middleman, a 5-man who can protect the basket. And so usually I sub my 5s back and forth. I have 2 or 3 of them, and I just sub those guys back and forth for each other. But we can, so that plays a role in how we do sub, for sure. Another big factor is conditioning. One of my best scorers, Drew Wyman, is a starter at the 4-man for me. But his conditioning, he plays better in 4-minute segments. I have another wing who, Jake O'Neal, who is a very well-conditioned athlete and can go for 6 or 8 minutes. So that determines, it's not that Drew did anything wrong. He might have already scored 8 points for us, but I'm still going to take him out at the first 4 minutes, because that rest and then subbing back in is going to be better for him over the long run. And so some of that plays a little bit of a factor for us. In terms of building it. And then, to be honest, I've really learned a lot about, if I'm going to have a confident team, if I'm going to play 8, 9, 10 guys, who do you pick to start? And I'll preface this. The worst thing that I hate about coaching basketball, it's not just college basketball, it's basketball, is picking playing time. It's hard, not fun. You recruited every player to be in your program. You want all of them to have, a great career and opportunity. But if I'm going to have a confident 8, 9, and 10, then I got to start looking at how do they work together. And it's not even just basketball. It's, if you look at our roster this year, we brought our leading scorer, our leading assist getter, and our leading rebounder, 3 different players. We brought them all off the bench this year. And if you're in the crowd and you're saying, geez, how come you're not starting your leading scorer, and your leading assist getter? It makes sense on paper, but truthfully, when you really dive into the cohesiveness of the team and you start to look about, where is respect and where is trust? And, at the beginning of the game, I want guys who aren't going to be chaotic. Sometimes you have a playmaker who's chaotic. I'd rather have that guy come off the bench for me later in the half. So it's all these little team chemistry things that make a factor in terms of how do we pick our starters and then how do we sub as we go through the game.
Well, I love this. And you've already mentioned, like, if a player's playing poorly, you're sticking with them because it gives them the confidence to play better and to get through those moments and get through those emotions. I'm assuming the same thing applies to someone who's playing really well. But within this situation here, you have some flexibility as a coach as well, right?
Yeah, it depends year to year or subchart to subchart. At the end of our final subchart we had this year, there were some spaces at the end of the first half that I left open. And my thought process was, whoever's playing well can get an extra 2 to 4 minutes. They've already established that they're probably going to get about 8, 10 minutes in that half. But if they are playing well, I want to get that guy back in. I have started to play around with playing guys for longer stretches. If you're subbing guys in, every 4 minutes, it can be hard sometimes if there's no stoppage of play and just to get into a rhythm. And so we are starting to play around with maybe 6-minute segments and maybe even a little longer. But yeah, we do try to leave the door open. Again, the second half is totally open. Like, if we feel like we got to do something, we will stray from the subchart. But what we feel confident about is that we didn't wear our players out. If you play your best player for 20 minutes in the first half and then you're in a pickle and you have to play him for 20 more minutes in the second half, we don't think we can win a lot of games doing that. So we want to make sure we manage it in the first half.
It's wonderful. So for a coach that's considering this, like the first time they've ever used a subchart, what is your suggestion? To have something very defined initially and then gradually get more flexible? Or what is your suggestion?
Yeah, well, first things first, it is hard when you get into foul trouble. And I've had the luxury of having some great assistants who have been able to, they have a plan in their head, or as the season goes on, I have a plan like, okay, we have this guy who can sub in. We do have the luxury here right now with our team that we do have guys that aren't in our rotation that can come into a game and play. We have a big man, Tyler Harris, who is a phenomenal player, but he's not always on our rotation every night. At each Sweet 16 we've played in, he's played like 15 minutes because of foul trouble, and he goes in there and he does great. And I think you're going to want to play at least 8, in my opinion, with a sub chart. I think the goal would be to push to 9 or 10. I think that's how you develop the best team. But you got to be ready that you're going to have some friction with it because things are going to happen. And so you do need to have a plan for how am I going to deal if I get into some foul trouble. And it takes some time. But I think the biggest thing is you just got to commit to it for a little while. It's like you pick a defense. Every team goes to their secondary defense. A lot of teams switch out of their man to go to a zone. They get a 3 hit on them in their zone defense and they get right out of it, And if you just commit to it, you'll settle into it. And so I think as a coach, you got to give it 5-7 games before you decide to scratch it. And you'll start to see some of the benefits of it.
Last thing on the subcharts, maybe we'll see. How are you communicating this to your players throughout the year, their positioning within the subchart?
Yeah, when we first started it, to be honest, we didn't necessarily want our guys to know we had it. I kind of hid it in my jacket, and you don't really want them to know. And then, of course, the word gets out. And at the end of the day, like I tell my guys all the time, if I can't tell you the truth, if we can't be a mature group, we can't go where we want to go. And so we just talk about everything open and honestly. We have a massive elephant, this big 6-foot stuffed elephant that goes everywhere with us. And that's the elephant in the room, right? Well, guess what? The elephant in the room is we have a subchart. Now, our guys don't specifically see the subchart before the game. But after about 5 or 10 games, they get a feel. They know where they're at. And especially those last 15 games, they could almost sub themselves in. I don't know why I don't necessarily show them. Sometimes I'll tell guys to take stress off of them. Hey, you're going to sub in at the 16-minute mark, so be ready. But we spend a lot of time as a team talking about chemistry and sacrifice and those things. And so this is just another part where our guys can show that they're bought in and they just roll with the punches.
Is the elephant flying with you too?
What's funny? I don't know that we brought the elephant to Kansas City, but it comes on the bus with us everywhere we go. So
that's awesome. Great. And you mentioned, building conceptual players being a part of what you do. So explain that a little bit more. And then especially in the context of, we'll talk about the zone a little bit, but especially in the context of playing a zone, which is a little less conceptual in its template, but I'm sure the way you run it is more conceptual.
Sure. Well, I always have believed that, like, for example, if we're just talking X's and O's, we want to be a motion team because at the end of the season, how do you guard motion? Like, you don't know exactly what a team is going to be doing. They might ball screen, they might post up, they might cut, whatever. And so that's the idea is we want to be this free flowing team. Well, in life, we want to be this free-flowing human being. We want to be conceptual. We want to understand things at a bigger rate. You get a lot of freshmen who have a lot of stress and worry on their plate because they don't know what it's like to go through a college season. And then you get your juniors and your seniors, you might lose a game and, they're not rattled at all. Or they might have a hard practice and they're not rattled at all, or maybe they have a hard day in school and they can manage it. And so we spend a lot of time really trying to help our players be aware that there is more to life than whatever they might see in their 18-year-old view. And so some things we do, like we try to read a lot of books. Every summer we're reading a book. I'll send that out here in the next couple of weeks, and it'll be accompanied with a shirt and a little note about our mentality. And I'll buy a book for any player if they want anything they want to read. We'll buy that. And so we really try to get our guys reading. And some kids want to read basketball books, but I've got 2 guys that are philosophy majors. They want to read things, outside of basketball, which I think is awesome. For any coach that's looking for conceptual books, Malcolm Gladwell's books, The Tipping Point, David versus Goliath, Talking to Strangers, all of those excellent books. They have nothing to do with sports. I take every one of his chapters and I bring it back to our program on how can we build a more cohesive program. And so it's just making your players aware that they have to grow mentally. just as much as they have to grow physically. I see it's summertime and you see it online, you see it on every Twitter and Instagram. Every player's grinding in the gym right now. And you can work on your crossover and you need to, and you can work on your jump shot and you need to. But what are you doing to prepare for the stress that you might be number 7 on your roster? How do you deal with that with your team? How do you become happy for your starters? What are you doing this summer to learn how to deal with your time management in class and your social life and like all that stuff? And so, everything we do, it's just trying to educate our players on how to handle their life at a higher level. And that all comes back to the basketball court.
Well, hopefully those players are doing it and just not tweeting about it. But I totally get it and understand what you're saying. It's beautiful. And you want players to think outside the box, is what you said to me. So, and you also mentioned this part about educating them with stats and then expecting them to freely make decisions. So connect those two things for us.
Yeah. So if you can probably tell in this conversation, like, I'm really big on team chemistry and psychology and the philosophy of the game. Like, I don't consider myself this wonderful X and O guy. I think we have a good system, but I don't always feel confident that I got the best stuff. And so as we were developing our system, I'm always thinking, well, how do I teach? How do I educate our guys on how to get better? And one thing that we found is that using stats, using research, which Malcolm Gladwell in his books, that's what he does. He uses research to prove his point. Well, for example, there is an article that I could actually get you if you wanted to post, but it's from 2015 and it's from the NBA. They statted 200,000 shots in the NBA. And they found out that there's 2 different types of shots. One is an extra pass shot, catch and shoot. And the other one is an on my own field goal, which means creating it off the bounce. They statted that out of those 200,000 shots, if you throw the extra pass and you catch and shoot, they go in at 51%. They also statted that if you shoot off the bounce, they go in at 38%. All right, so right there, we already know, all right, if we want to shoot better, we better throw the extra pass and catch and shoot more than we shoot off the bounce. That's the stats right there. But then we've gone deeper. We've studied what stats does it take to win a national championship. So we went back, we've got the last 10 national champions, and we statted their whole season, or we took their season averages and we averaged it out. And so what we actually learned from those champions was that if you want to be a national champion, you got to shoot 47% or higher from the field. That's not me, Coach Blaine, telling you that. That is proof if you want to be a national champion. And so what we do is we sit with our guys and we show them all this. And so, okay, 47% to be a national champion. The article says 51% extra pass versus 38% on my own field goal. So now our players start to see, okay, if we want to be a national champion, we actually got to lean more towards the extra pass. Doesn't mean that I always tell our guys this all the time, does not mean you don't shoot off the bounce. If you want to win a national championship, you better have some guys who can jump up and score. For us, Charles Elsie, the MVP, Samaje Morgan, our freshman point guard, Drew Wyman, those guys can score mid-range jump shots. But if you want, like this year, we won 36 games in a row. If you want to be consistent, you got to play to the stats a little bit. So in the middle of a game, we might take 3, shots off the bounce, and now I don't have to yell and scream at you. Now I might be aggressive, but now I get to say, hey, those go in at 38%, and then you're dealing with the players' emotions. You know how mad players get when they miss mid-range jump shots? I look at our guys all the time and say, you can't get mad. The stats show you that shot's not going to go in very much, right? And so now there's where growth comes from. So to be even a better offensive team, well, what are the 3 best shots in the game? Open threes, open layups, and free throws. Those all go in at higher than 47%. And so we use those stats to educate. And as the year goes on, that's where our guys really grow. They realize how that comes into a factor.
Yeah, it's awesome. Great way to be able to connect stats to performance and help players understand what you're talking about as a coach. And my other question, kind of with building conceptual players on offense and defense here, how are your practices structured? Because I find that people that are trying to build conceptual players, your practices are different than the traditional unopposed perfection drill type practices. But what is the case in your situation?
Yeah, great question. That's how we're always thinking, how do we become conceptual? What do we got to do to, in our practice to help them grow?
Well, I
One thing
imagine
that
you got to play a lot of basketball.
Yeah, no, there's merit. It gives me confidence to say, okay, we can play some 5-on-5 today,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not wasting our time. We can teach while we're playing. But one little thing that we really believe, of course, there's a lot of things we believe. You'll hear me say that, over the course of an hour. We believe, we believe. Well, yeah, there's a lot that we do believe in. But one thing that we know for a fact is that communication builds trust. And so we want our players to become great communicators. That is a conceptual part of life. The better you communicate, the better your life's going to be. And so we actually will open up our practice at least once a week with a game called Catchphrase, which is a little handheld console. It costs about $15 on Amazon, and it gives you a word, and you got to explain the word to your team without saying the word. Right. So we actually go 2 teams against each other. First 1 to 3 points. Whoever loses has to run a couple down and backs. Now, as a coach, you got to commit about 10 or 15 minutes to this because it can take a little while. Guys are having fun and gets a little goofy, but those 10 or 15 minutes are better than any other drill that I can do because you'll see our juniors and our seniors, they learn how to play the game and they learn how to communicate to their team to get the word that they want. And you'll watch our freshmen and our transfers, they struggle so bad to communicate the word. And so I've committed to this even more. We play it when we go to national tournament. They all ask, "You got catchphrase? We got catchphrase." And we're playing that, before our national championship game in our shoot around on municipal court. So that's a little thing is we add some fun into practice about communicating. But our drills, one of the first drills we'll do in our first practice is a 4-on-3 scramble drill. So your 3 defenders are down a player and there's some rules to it, but there's only a certain amount of time and everything. But they got to think, they got to think, how do I take the 3 best shots away? How do I take open layups away, open threes, and not foul to put them on the foul line? And I'm down a player, right? And so we start using those types of drills. I've had a coach who actually told me they did not believe in advantage drills. Advantage drills means that one team has more players than the other. I'll be honest, with the way that I want to develop our team, I like advantage drills because it makes both sides have to think because somebody's open. Even the offense has to think, well, geez, we have the advantage. We've got 4 players. We should be finding an open layup or an open 3. And if you're not, then maybe you're not really thinking outside the box very much. So it's little drills like that. We watch a lot of film outside of practice just to show them concepts and show them how they're moving and what decisions they're making. But definitely try to make it a little more free flowing in practice for sure.
I love that. I mean, it's a little shocking about that advantage drill, conversation a little bit, but advantage drills. I mean, you got to learn how to not just create an advantage, but leverage the advantage. And then obviously the basketball is a game of opposite. So if defense has the advantage or vice versa, you've got to learn how to obviously counter it. So I love that. It's such a big part of it. And you mentioned it, it's always 2-way coaching too, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah. Players should be coaching the team at the end of the day. And so they're constantly coaching their own teams on offense or defense. But you're right. You can get stuff from both sides. I've actually had to try to learn as a coach when you're in practice in October and you're playing against each other, somebody's going to do something bad and somebody's going to do something good. And you try not to pick on one or the other too much, but certainly 2-way coaching for sure.
Look, yeah, I mean, you've shared so much gold here, but I know a lot of coaches probably want me to get to the zone defense because with Jim Boeheim gone, you might be the best zone coach in the country now. So let's talk about it. What's the philosophy behind the zone? And, you've run this for such a long time to great effect that certainly some coach in Canada has heard your name because of this. So it's wonderful.
Well, I appreciate it. It's every year we've run it for 5 seasons now. And if you look at our success, it's hard to say we're not going to do it again. I have tried every year to say, you know what, maybe we should do more man. Maybe we should change and do something different. And then I look at our stats and I'm like, wait a second, what are we thinking? And I love the debate. I coach AAU basketball too, and I love the debates online about should you play zone in AAU and in youth ball and I totally agree with the merit of building the player in man defense. They need to learn those principles. Our zone defense is based on man principles. We just happen to start in what looks like a zone, right? But then you watch the Miami Heat, and here they are in the NBA Finals as an 8 seed using a zone, and their players are conceptual, and it's making those other teams think outside the box. And if they don't think very well, you could beat them in a game or two. But um, we've really fallen in love with the zone for a lot of reasons. A lot of teams don't play against it, especially when we go to the national tournament. They haven't played against it. You'll play teams that have only had 100 clips out of maybe 2,000 that year on their synergy accounts. They don't have an idea of what their plan is against it. We play back to back Friday, Saturday nights in our conference, and we found that playing the zone helps our prep. Most people think that I hear it all the time from other college coaches. The zone is soft. You guys get to be soft, and come play us. Come play us. Our players play as hard as anybody in the country. You want to have a good zone, you cannot be soft in the zone. You got to play hard. So we're not playing zone back to back nights because we want to break. We're playing it because our prep for the next team, we think, is a lot easier. It's a lot less stressful. We're not trying to go over a ton of man actions. There's only so many things you can do against the zone. So those are some of the things. But to be honest with you, the number one thing, and I mean, if we all want to take our ego out of the game of basketball, let's just be really honest right here. The three best shots in the game are open layups, open threes, and free throws. The zone is designed. We have a guy standing in front of the rim. We are going to take away your open layups. Our zone, which we can talk about in a little bit, is designed to take away the three ball, because when you throw that ball into the 3 point line, we are exiting and we are going to the 3 point line. So you're not just picking out for open three. If you look at our 3 point defense percentage, I think we were 30%. We only allowed our opponents to shoot 30%. Now, if you want to win a national championship, you got to shoot 36%. And we only allowed them to shoot 30. So that's pretty significant. And then traditionally in the zone, you don't foul as much. Teams aren't driving as much. They're not moving as much. And so now they're not getting free throws. So they look up, they might hit some shots, but you look up at the clock and they've got 45 points with 5 minutes left in the game. So that's just you got to take the ego out of it. The stats prove that zone is actually designed to guard the game of basketball better than man. And so I don't know if you want to dive into the basic rules or.
I do. I mean, just one comment. I mean, when you're talking and you've coached AAU and I'm coaching AAU a little bit right now. I mean, the only issue I have with zone is the default to zone, because you're not going to teach the game, and what you said is exactly true. You're teaching a man and you're putting him in a zone because all the principles are the same. And then the other part of the debate is obviously about whether it should be administered out of the game. And I'll tell you, I've been in countries where they administer zone out of the game and they're still playing zone. Yeah. So just focus on the solution and not the problem. And the solution is teaching your players conceptually how to play, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, go watch any good man defensive team. What are they really doing? They're zoning, right? Help side defense is zone defense, right?
In some countries in the world, you are not allowed to play help defense until after 13, after 14 for that reason. Yeah. But again, that creates a whole bunch of other problems as well.
Sure. I think it's probably a better way to just say we consider ourselves a 2-3 matchup zone. We're just morphing. We're starting in a zone and it's moving to man. Whereas in man defense, you're starting with a man and you're moving to your help side, which is your zone. It's the same stuff. We're just starting in different places, I think. So, we have 3 basic rules that we started with. Literally 5 years ago, we gave up 51 free throw attempts to Montana Western and lost by about 10 on their home court. And we were driving home and we were thinking, man, we got to do something different. 51 free throw attempts is way too many in a game. I think the most I've ever seen. But so we took 3 days. We said we're going to run some zone, and we started with three rules. First rule is, in our matchup zone, never have 2 guys guarding the ball. So most times in a zone, the guy dribbles down the court, the point guard, and both the top guys in the zone are guarding the ball. That's a mistake. Now they have an advantage. So we want to match to their setup. Basically, we're set up in a 2-3, but everybody knows who their guy is, and they're basically standing next to him. So rule number 1, never have 2 guys guarding the ball. Rule number 2, always bump the wings. And this has been a funny one for me. there what I call basic rules, and then there's advanced rules. Our program here at the College of Idaho, we are playing on some very advanced rules because we've been doing it for 6 years, and I've got 4-year guys in the program. When you start the zone, stick to the rules. Don't let them become too conceptual to start because you're not ready for all that. So rule number 2 is always bump the wings. Always. The only time you wouldn't really bump them is if the ball is caught in the corner or maybe a couple steps above. As your team gets better, you will learn when you don't always have to bump the wings. There's that gray area right around the free throw line extended where you're kind of like, did we want to bump it? What we've found though in games is that we'll make the adjustment and say, hey, don't bump the wings right now. It confuses our guys more. They don't play as hard and we're less effective. So we actually commit to bumping the wings every time. Plus, in theory, it's going to put your best defender on the ball for most of the time, and it's going to put your best rebounders around the rim or your strongest guys to guard people down around the rim. So rule number 2, always bump the wings. Last rule we started with, 3 days of practice and we played games on it. When the ball goes to the high post, we yell match, and everybody touches their matchup. We're going to play you one-on-one at that point. So you might be saying, well, what does that really mean? You got to touch your matchup. There's probably 3 players on the perimeter, more than likely, because that's usually what zone offense is. Your wings and your guards, if that's their match, they got to go out and touch them. We're going to play you one-on-one from the free throw line with our biggest defender. That's the goal. You got to score a contested 2 over the top of us. And truthfully, this is what we always say when we start. We don't care if they hit the 15-foot jump shot. There are not a lot of people who can do it at a high rate. Statistically, it's one of the toughest shots in the game. And it's funny, like some guys will do it and they'll have 14 points and they'll leave the game and they'll think that they played really well and nobody else touched the ball and nobody else scored in that game. And they're frustrated, right? But the high post thinks he did a good job. And so we want to funnel that ball to the high post. Now, we say we don't care if they hit the high post jump shot. But as you get better at the zone, we start challenging our guys like, hey, you can do more. You can take his mid-range jump shot away and not get beat for the drive. Whatever you do, though, don't give up open layups, right? When you match to your guys, you got to stay in front of them. So at that point, technically, we are in man defense. Now, what you hear from a lot of our opponents and fans is they'll say all the time, well, we weren't sure if you were in man or zone at that point. I hear it with the announcers all the time. They're saying, well, it looks like they're in man right now. And I'm kind of laughing because no, we're not. We're in zone at that point. But those are advanced rules. And as a coach, you might say, well, how do you teach all this? And the truth is, you build conceptual players and they will lead the way. You don't have to have an answer for everything. Take away layups, take away open threes, don't foul, and play as hard as you can. That's it. I don't have to have an answer for everything that's going on.
No, and you mentioned those advantage, disadvantage drills too. Those help players figure out answers, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. If you can get your guys playing hard, and like for us, one of our rules is you got to contest every 3-pointer. Well, if you've ever read the book, what's the tennis book?
The Inner Game of Tennis.
The Inner Game of Tennis. Yes. It's an excellent book. It tells you teach one thing that's going to fix 10 things. Don't teach 10 things because you'll fail at all of them. So for us, we believe in contesting 3-pointers because if you're going to contest every 3, you're probably playing super hard. You're probably running around. You're probably thinking a pass or 2 ahead. And so we get a lot of result out of just demanding that you contest every single 3.
Timothy Galloway, Inner Game of Tennis, just a must read for coaches if you haven't read it. Tremendous stuff. So the high post thing, I love that. I used to coach in FIBA rules, and that used to be anytime we're in zone and went to the high post, we're in man, because again, they don't have time to shift to something else anyways, conceptually. Yeah. So I love that. What are you doing against ball screen, which is obviously a very common way to be able to attack a zone nowadays?
Yeah, ball screens have been great. We've actually simplified our ball screen defense. The fun thing about zone is you can find an answer for everything. I think that's a frustrating thing for some coaches is they can't explain why 3s are getting hit on them or, how to guard a ball screen. You can find an answer for every type of thing. So about 5 years ago, we literally had 5 or 6 ball screen defensive strategies, right? If the ball was on the outside thirds of the court, we would ice them. Just like in man defense, we would keep it to the baseline like the NBA does. When the ball was in the middle third, we would just switch the ball screen with our top two guards. I mean, we had all these types of specific ball screen stuff. But what I actually found was, once again, the more you do, the harder it is to figure out all the time. And when we were going back and forth between our man and our zone, our our ball screen defense in the man and the zone didn't align, and I didn't like that. So what we've actually really settled on, and I really enjoy it, is if you set a ball screen, we're going to do what we call twist, which what that means is we're switching it. If you set a middle ball screen, we're switching it with the other top guard, which is what 90% of people do. But what we've learned is that you can't just switch it flat, because if you're in a zone and they come off that ball screen and you're flat and they fire it to the wing, you don't want passes to be firing around. So what we've learned is it's actually about, it's a hedge. So we have our top guard run out and basically hedge it, jump it. And what that does is it startles the point guard or the guard, whoever's got the ball, and you can't throw a direct pass. The other part of that is if he can't throw a direct pass, think about what the wing has to do to get the ball. The wing has to move up. He moves further away from the three-point line. He is no longer a scoring threat. So we like to do what we call jump twist most ball screens. Now, people do set outside ball screens. Outside ball screens are good action. It's very hard to guard. We watched a couple years ago, Duke actually went to a zone for a while. And when people were setting outside ball screens, they would bring their opposite top guard all the way through the switch. Now, that's very hard. I always like to say this, though. I mean, we could do a whole nother clinic, and I can show you clips and all this stuff on the zone. And hopefully someday I'll have a clip, that people can put on DVD and watch. But I always believe this as a coach. No matter, you always think, well, what are they going to do? What if they do that? Well, what if? They still have to make the shot. So for us, if they set an outside ball screen and they pull up off the bounce and shoot a mid-range jump shot and it doesn't go in, even though it was open, I'm like, all right, I don't need to panic and do anything different. If they can't make their open shots, then to me, I don't even care, to be honest. So a lot of things you can do on the ball screen, but keep it simple.
No, I love that idea. The jump twist is great, and don't let the ball go where it wants to go is another part of that, I'm sure. How about cutters? And that's another challenge that coaches always talk about with zone.
Yeah, we have some really good teams that do cut against us, and we scout that because it's emotional. When the ball goes into the high post and we match, we are scouting, do they cut hard? And if they do, you might have to go with them. And so all of a sudden you have your top guard is all the way on the opposite baseline because his guy had cut through and he's got to go with them. And that's kind of the fun part is when your guys start realizing that they got to make decisions. We try our best to switch cutters. So for example, ball goes to the high post and a top guard and a wing or a guy in the corner, they cross paths. We try to switch that because we want to keep our guys in the same areas of the zone that they're traditionally used to. But if you can't, you can't. Now, usually by this point, there's only 10 seconds left on that shot clock. And so at that point, you just got to play hard and make a decision. But cutters are good action for sure. Cutters before we match, before the ball goes into the high post, has actually not been too much of an issue for us. We just let people cut, and we just got to make sure we know who our matches are in case the ball does go in.
So being this effective zone coach now, what do you like to run against zones?
This might be the best question I've actually been asked. This is the absolute truth. I don't like to play our zone defense in our practice much because I get really frustrated watching our offense try to play against it. Our zone is designed to take the flow out of the game, right? And so now I'm in practice and you don't pop the ball and, you're getting frustrated with your guys. And so I actually don't like to play against our zone much. And I don't know if I actually know exactly what I would do against it. I've never had a chance to play against it. But there's a couple things.
Yeah, how about just against any zone you play against now?
Yes. So I tell our guys all the time, we don't work on our zone offense that much because I tell them do the things that people do to us, right? So we just have a couple common themes. We want to move the ball quickly, right? We don't want to hold and stand. You want to stay aggressive. We actually like to transition in overloads. We want to run right to an overload. So instead of coming down in your traditional break, we actually bring both of our guards down the same side of the court, which is an immediate overload. And so you're just trying to find that quick advantage to be able to attack, really. What we do educate our guys on is the emotion of how the zone's going to make them feel, right? A lot of maybe a shooter's shooting 3 or 4 feet deeper than they normally are. Maybe the point guard's just standing at the top and he feels like he's out of rhythm. And so, I just feel like if we convince him to stay aggressive, move the ball, and we also, I lost my, oh, we prep them for how they're going to feel. We've had pretty good success with it, to be honest. The whole game, a whole nother clinic too, is offensive rebounds is a massive way to score. So you just shoot the ball and go get offensive rebounds. That's zone offense in itself. I think as a coach, this isn't just zone, this is offense in general. You want to know your layup package before you start the game. How are you going to score layups? What are your actions? What are your sets? Doesn't mean you can't be a free-flowing team, but maybe you need to score 2 layups on an out-of-bounds play or a specific quick hit set to get yourself 8 or 10 points in the game. So that's if we play a zone, I'm always going to have what's my layup package as well.
That's great stuff. And you mentioned not wanting to play against your zone a lot in practice. And that is a challenge of playing a lot of zone, is that you play, I assume, against more man than zone. So what are you doing within practice to get your man-to-man ready offensively?
Yeah. So in our normal practice flow, we play against our man a lot, which we used our man significantly this year. Actually, it was good for us. I had 2 guards who were super athletic and they kind of had that dog mentality, and so you wanted to let them loose sometimes. And so we actually went to man, and I had some wings that could switch ball screens. And here's the thing. I mean, take it or leave it. I'm not losing the game in the zone. If it is tied with 30 seconds left, I'm not going to lose the game in a zone. I'm not going to let you just shoot a wide open high post jump shot. So we got to be ready for man. We use our man a lot in the end of game situations. And so in practice, we play against our man defense all the time because we're constantly trying to learn how to guard ball screens. We get good at our zone when we start prepping for games because we do a 20-minute scout on our opponent. And so you're doing that 2 or 3 times a week. That's an hour of zone prep. And then you play the game. You get better once you play the game. So we played Arizona Christian this year. We lost our first game of the year, and they did a great job. And we got tremendously better after that game because we don't necessarily just start practicing our zone right away. It's kind of right when we start our season, to be honest.
Coach, I mean, as we wrap up, I've got to talk to you. I mean, College of Idaho, 2 basketball national championships, some other success in other sports. Seems like a great place to coach.
It's pretty special. And when you really look at the total success of all, not just our athletic programs, but the college itself, you realize, man, this whole thing works together. So we are a liberal arts college, which what does that mean? It's a broad education, right? We have over 95 countries represented on our campus by international students. And so what you get in the classroom, your education is coming from your peers, right? And your professors who are pushing you. It's not just about taking tests and sitting and reading exam prep, all that stuff. It's about what are you learning from each other. Our staff, our faculty, our athletic department, everybody's moving in the same direction to help build a more conceptual being. We're not trying to teach you what to think, we're trying to teach you how to think. And the greatest thing that we not only did we have basketball success this year, but we had a national champion track star. We had the 8th Rhodes Scholar in the history of our college in Kaya Evans. She was a women's soccer player. To earn a Rhodes Scholarship is incredibly hard. And if you ever get a chance to listen to her talk, you'll understand why it happened. It's because of how she grew to learn about life while she was here at the college. She contributes her entire college experience, not just women's soccer, on how she grew as a human being. And that's what separated her in the Rhodes Scholarship. But when I look around and I think, what helped us win a national championship? It wasn't just our basketball program. It was our faculty. It was our fellow students. It was our community that are helping our guys grow and helping our program grow. So this place is pretty special and everybody's moving in the right direction.
Well, and they have a special coach in you as well. And I just love how you blend psychology, common sense, and coaching. Just tremendous and tremendous share for all of our audience. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
You bet. Enjoyed being on.